It's been quite a while since I've paddled this stretch. Though it's not what I would consider one of my top-tier destinations, it does offer some unique charm and a glimpse of the versatility among the plethora of dynamic Gulf Coast demographic paddle routes. To set the stage, winds were pretty harsh today, with relentless gusts up to 19. I launched from the shore on the north side of Port Road between Bay Area Boulevard and Highway 146. Depending on water levels, this launch can be a bit of a challenge for those not used to directly accessing the waterway without the aid of a ramp or slide launch. You're likely to get muddy in the process, but it's certainly doable in all but the lowest water levels. I hooked a right and headed under the road and rail bridges into the northern portion of Taylor Lake. I'd intended to traverse this section into the lakefront residential zone and on into Clear Lake. But the blustery conditions on the open tracts caused me to change my plans. Instead, I elected to bear right after cresting the rail bridge, where I was greeted by several pelicans lounging on a transmission tower. From here, I kept northward onto an unnamed small channel that branches off of Taylor Lake proper. Though this stretch is relatively short, just a mile and a half or so, it's well worth trekking. It seems to subdue the industrial port-adjacent ambiance of the area and offer a more quaint bayou dynamic. One notable landmark, the Hammer McFadden Harris Cemetery, rests on the port side on this branch's initial stretch. This graveyard dates back to its initial interment in 1846 and is the final resting ground for some of Harris County's early pioneer families. Today, visibility of this site was hampered quite a bit by tall marsh grass on the bank, but I'll roll in some pictures from previous paddles. From here, the bayou channel continues on, getting gradually and subtly more narrow with each stroke. There is another short branch off to the right that will take paddlers the meager distance to Bay Area Boulevard, but I elected not to travel this menial section today. I kept onward until reaching the terminus of this stretch, just before Red Bluff Road, which is shrouded by trees. From here, it was just a matter of retracing my strokes back towards Taylor Lake. I did encounter one tiny, timid gator popping his head up here and there along the way. Once hitting the main body of the lake, I made a slight southward jog before the wind once again deterred me. As a result, I skirted the east bank back under the rail bridge with several more pelicans and a few cormorants keeping me company. Once I was back on the launch side of the bridges, I kept following the contour of the waterway toward Highway 146. It is worthy of note that just past the bridges, there is a narrow entrance on the starboard side that leads to a surprisingly large and peaceful cove that's worth exploring. The only potential impediment to this is that there are often several fishermen casting from the mouth of the channel, which can be a bit of a nuisance to navigate. As I curved around to face the highway, I was met with lines of standstill big rigs backed up on the port feeder, along with train cars sitting idle on the parallel rail bridge. Upon passing beneath the overpass, the waterway cuts sharply left, and I was flanked by a behemoth storage tank battery in the starboard bank. I was now skirting the boundary of the bustling port of Houston, which was pulsing with the irregular rhythms of its industrial orchestra. As I continued on, the waterway then cut eastward, where I found myself flanked by residences to the left and the port on the right. It was a peculiar dynamic, as this stretch had a peaceful ambiance to it, in spite of the bustling commerce center so close by. On this stretch, I was greeted by two variations of crane, first in the form of the towering harbor cranes, and also in the form of waterfowl. But it was the egrets, both great and snowy, that dominated this stretch. There were quite a few clusters roosting in the shoreline vegetation that would launch skyward in unison as I draw near, only to repeat the cycle several times over. About halfway down the tributary was a break in the trees, revealing one of the several massive vessels being unloaded in the port. This stretch eventually concluded at the apex of a residential street. Here, I swept around and began the trip back, making a quick detour down a short path that parallels some more homes on one side and Heron Park, a small neighborhood destination, on the other. Here, I noted a stepped dock-like structure that might be a suitable launch option for more flexible paddlers, if bypassing the surrounding open sections is desired. I kept on homeward, playing a game of leapfrog with several egrets nearly all the way back to 146. I was almost there, but the wind was not through with me yet. The paddle back to the launch was quite an arduous one, but slow and steady won the race as I slid back into the bank from which I'd started this nearly 7 3/4 mile trek. So what are my summarized impressions of this route? Aside from the fact that it's not a preferred destination when gusts are high, and its launch may be considered lackluster to some, it's certainly worth revisiting occasionally. It's a versatile route, especially in favorable conditions, as you can go from a nature-dominant lake to an impressive residential sector to the energy of a thriving port. This, coupled with a couple quaint bayou branches and calm coves, offers several variations to respective paddlers. Give it a shot. Paddle safe, and God bless. Subscribe to GCK for more great Gulf Coast kayaking and outdoors content.